sponsor LiveWatch right now. Home security made easy. Plug and protect do-it-yourself wireless technology. Save 40 to 60% from competitor systems. Patented ASAP or instant message and fast response make responding to a potential emergency as easy as checking your cell phone and sending a text message to friends and family. No contracts and cancel at any time. The fastest alarm system technology ever created. Take control of your family's security with LiveWatch today. Click the link below. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. Today is Thursday, October 8th, 2015. How Syria leads to world war. How Syria leads to world war. This is what I'm going to discuss in today's video. You know, what irks me about this mainstream media narrative in Syria, which has been going on for some time now, over 5 years. I mean, it's incredible to me. I have dozens and dozens of videos. In fact, watch our predictions playlist in Syria, of which we have dozens and dozens of videos talking about how Obama was going to strike Syria. I remember when people called me a conspiracy theorist years ago, that Barack Obama was going to specifically target this part of the world, that he was anti-congressionally, anti-constitutionally going to strike, that he wasn't going to withdraw troops from the Middle East. He was, in fact, going to re-engage. I'm Christopher Green. You're watching AMTV Alternative Media Television. We just put up a breaking video. U.S. warships are moving off the coast of Syria, preparing for an attack. This, of course, has been a part of the agenda, and it's been in the works for years. Please join us on Facebook. We've posted a handful of videos ranging from the last 30 days to over 2 years ago, predicting war with Syria as a direct consequence and pre-planned, orchestrated, manufactured attack as a result of the 2008 financial crisis.
You know, I'm reading a ton of reports that I've been poring over the entire morning, and this has been settling in really from yesterday. Many of you that are in the know that the Syrian conflict is escalating. Now, this is something we talked about over 2 years ago. So we're going to go to war. Watch the United States, people like Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, watch Barack Obama, Mr. Hope and Change. Watch him go in, take over for President George W. Bush and be even worse. Watch him do not just Iraq and Afghanistan and keep the killing going on over there, but watch him go and invade Libya. Watch him bypass the War Power Resolution Act, bypasses Congress, bypasses the U.S. Constitution on a regular basis. Now I'm telling you, watch him go into Syria, watch him go into Iran, and continue the killing.
But what irks me about this mainstream media propaganda web is how it's portrayed by the West. How in every article I'm reading now, it's that Putin is a liar. And that he's not really targeting ISIS, even though he is, but he's only targeting the Syrian opposition on the ground, as if that is something bad. Now, I'm not arguing that Putin isn't targeting CIA assets in Syria, is not targeting the moderate opposition, these moderate terrorists, as the U.S. frames it, and the mainstream media frames it. Of course he is. But we're not asking the more important question. The mainstream media isn't. They're framing it in a negative light towards and geared towards Putin and Russia and the Russian government. Who was there first? Remember, it was the United States, through intelligence, the CIA, arming moderate terrorists on the ground in Syria that has caused this fiasco in the first place. The anti-congressional airstrikes that started last year, September 2014, that is responsible for this crisis. Running guns through Libya, what is now known as Benghazi Gate, the death of Christopher Stevens, CIA liaison, and several other Americans. Guess where those guns were going? Syria. Guess who they were arming? The moderate terrorists on the ground to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. The same reason and the same tactics used by the West to overthrow through the indirect murder and assassination of Muammar Gaddafi. And you see, now the Middle East is worse off. And that's not an opinion. That's not an argument. It's just the truth. The Levant is worse off. Syria and Iraq is worse off. There's a more radical element and terrorist organization in the name of ISIS, which, by the way, sprouted out of nowhere just about a year ago, came out of nowhere from the CIA's figment of their own imagination. Isn't it interesting? We'd never even heard about ISIS before. All of a sudden, ISIS was just created from nothing. We'd heard about Al-Qaeda, but because Obama had conveniently snuffed that out, even though Osama bin Laden had died multiple times, remember they kicked his dead body off a warship, excuse me, without any evidence, not a tweet pic of his body. They couldn't really verify any kind of DNA or anything like that. They just kicked his body off a U.S. warship. When that was conveniently over with, and the U.S. dumb Americans that drink the Kool-Aid that makes up the mainstream media were cheering in the streets, they just created a new element, a new dragon, a new face of terrorism to justify war. And it leads us to where we are in the Middle East today, where we are in Syria. So how does this lead to world war? Well, now we have Putin taking action, just like he took action in Ukraine, as a direct consequence and result of U.S. meddling. Again, the United States, through their color revolutions, their experimentation, their rousing of the Arab Spring, through intelligence assets here in the States that are planted in the Middle East, have caused arguably most of this chaos in this part of the world, places like Iraq and Afghanistan. So how does this unfold? So Putin now is bombing through airstrikes. They've launched hundreds since last Monday. Cruise missiles are being launched off Russian warships, flying through, I believe, Iraq and Iran to target places in Syria to support the Bashar al-Assad government, an ally of Russia, an ally of the BRICS nations, also China, which we're not hearing a lot about at this very moment. How does this unfold? I think, in my humble opinion, very dangerously. We have a situation where, just take a look at this weekend, Russian fighter jets are running in and out of Turkish airspace, really just taunting and testing the West, the United States, and our ally in the name of Turkey. We have a situation where Putin is running his own airstrikes, the U.S. is running their own airstrikes, and Putin is specifically targeting CIA assets and intelligence assets on the ground, destroying them, killing these moderate rebels, of which there's really nothing left. How does the United States respond to this? What does the United States do? Do they stand down? That would actually be the best case scenario if the U.S. just stood down in Syria and just said, hey, this probably wasn't a good move. We've tried unsuccessfully to oust Bashar al-Assad. This hasn't worked. This has sparked an interest in Russia. Russia has adequately responded to this mess, and we're just going to give up on this tactic, at least in the short run. Just like John McCain a few years ago guaranteed us with a personal guarantee that Russia wouldn't act. Well, he was wrong. Russia has acted. They've launched over 100 airstrikes in Syria. They're launching cruise missiles off their warships. So now maybe they just made a mistake, right? They should quit. But I actually don't think that this is going to happen. I think that we are positioned for some kind of event, some kind of accident, while the U.S. is running their own air campaigns and Putin is running his own air campaigns. Two separate campaigns. Something's bound to happen. Either one of these jets is going to run into each other, a missile is going to hit the wrong target. Something's going to happen, and I fear that it will only escalate the situation in this part of the world. Again, nobody's not arguing that Putin is targeting CIA assets in Syria. Of course he is. Of course he's supporting his ally in Syria. Of course he's supporting the Assad government. It's the United States that started this mess in the first place. Again, through arming moderate terrorists on the ground. And again, I don't know what the difference is between a moderate and just a regular terrorist. I mean, that's an oxymoron in and of itself. I mean, they're both cutting people's heads off. They're both extremely dangerous. There is no difference. How is this okay? How can the mainstream media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, present this to the American public as if Putin's in the wrong, as if Russia's in the wrong, when it's the U.S. through their destabilization effort and their intelligence operations that, again, has been pushing to transform this part of the world in the first place. I mean, nobody's talking about the fact that the U.S. illegally, its aim has been to topple a rightful sovereign government in the name of Assad. They've tried to frame him through the Ghouta chemical attack, which I talked about yesterday in several videos, dozens of videos really over the last couple of years. They've been arming moderate terrorists on the ground to overthrow his government. I mean, what if Russia was to do this to the United States? What if Russia or Assad, for example, was arming moderate terrorists on the ground, or, moderates here in the United States to overthrow the Obama government? Would that be positioned in a positive light? I mean, that's really what Obama's been doing in Syria. It's exactly what the United States has done in Libya with Muammar Gaddafi. It's exactly what the United States has done through George W. Bush in Iraq. It's exactly what the attempt was in Afghanistan. These are all coups. And it's amazing how the mainstream media portrays this as if Putin's a bad guy. Putin, and I'm not even defending him, is just reacting to U.S. meddling, is just reacting to this illegal activity that's being committed by the United States of America. And it's only escalating tensions. Again, the United States has set its eyes set on a lot of things. First off, they want the oil, they want the blood money, they want the black gold, they want to create this instability. Through this push in this propaganda web, backed by their allies like Israel, backed by a really, I would argue, deteriorating relationship with Saudi Arabia. We see how this is unfolding economically now with the manufactured artificial oil crisis and OPEC, battling for control of the oil markets through this massive supply glut, which again is totally artificial. All this plays into economics. It plays into geopolitics. It plays into the fact, really just the testament, that Russia and China are much stronger than they ever have been before in world history. The U.S. really has just showcased itself as a weak country. I mean, we see this recently with the negotiations with Iran. I mean, why would the U.S. be negotiating with Iran when four-star generals like Wesley Clark tell us that we're going to go to war with them?
This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
In the not too distant future, I mean, Syria is just a proxy, just like Iraq and Afghanistan are a proxy. They create this destabilized effect in the Middle East so that we can eventually target Iran. So it only shows our weakness. It shows the United States of America in a weakened state, politically, militarily, and economically. Again, all this plays into economics. It shows the brute strength of the emerging East, of Russia, of Putin's government, his military technology, launching these cruise missiles. This is a new technology they've never even launched before, which have successfully been striking parts of basically these moderate terrorist groups backed by the West that are trying to topple a rightful government. I mean, again, what if Assad was arming Americans here on the ground to overthrow Barack Obama? I mean, that wouldn't be framed as a positive. That should be framed as a negative. That is exactly what the United States is doing in Syria. It's exactly what they've done through Operation Iraqi Freedom. These are just coups. This is what the revolution and re-revolution in places like Egypt is. This is what Syria is all about. So we have to ask ourselves, does the United States just quit now? Do they give up? Are they just going to, put their tail between their legs and say that we've been beat? I have a hard time believing that. I mean, when have we seen that in the past? When have we seen the United States not act in this part of the world? When have we seen a president not go to war in this part of the world? Whether or not it's Bush or Obama, liberal, Democrat, conservative, or Republican. I mean, this seems to be the agenda. Again, we have the presidents of the United States, which are just the pawns and the mouthpieces that represent the corporate interests that really run this country. The men in the cigar room smoking behind the curtain. Many of these names maybe we'll never even know. It's why we've had the ushering in of things like the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which its aim is to integrate this government into the New World Order system that we've been talking about for years now. What was once called conspiracy theory, the fact that Obama would engage Syria, that he wouldn't withdraw troops from this part of the world, he would actually send them. He's arming moderate troops, terrorists on the ground right now, has only escalated. It's escalated very quickly. Again, we are involved, folks, in this massive propaganda web. We have propaganda coming from the Russian government, Russian media. We have propaganda coming from the Western media, the Obama administration. It's our job to divvy through all this information, to analyze it, and to basically uncover the truth. Again, who's responsible for the original meddling in this part of the world? Which country has been invading this part of the world with a historical track record? Which country fought wars like Operation Iraqi Freedom, which was really just Operation Coup of Iraq? Which countries have been bombing and invading places like Afghanistan post-September 11th, countries that have had nothing to do with WMDs or September 11th, 2001 at all, according to the official narrative? Which country has been arming Syrian moderate, but really just terrorists on the ground with heavy artillery, weapons of war, these moderate terrorists turning into radical terrorists, which becomes ISIS and ISIL? How did ISIS even come to be in the last year? I mean, ask yourself again. I asked this question in the last video. Is ISIS even real? It's only been around for like a year. I mean, isn't this a convenient narrative that this just spawns out of nowhere, that all of a sudden the United States comes up with this tagline that now that Al-Qaeda has been snuffed out mysteriously and Osama bin Laden's body kicked off a warship without any evidence to prove his death, even though he's died several times according to the mainstream media and official government narrative, now we have ISIS. And that's the reason and justification that we have to go fight these wars. So basically, Putin has just turned the tables on the West. He's now using Western media as propaganda that's justifying his own airstrikes, his own launch of cruise missiles, 100 strikes so far, if not more, as I'm probably broadcasting this video. He's completely turned the tables on the West. He's shown the United States government, her allies, Israel, Western-backed interests, and intelligence here for what it really is. He's basically shined a light on the agenda. And so where does this go from here? Does the United States not act? Do they realistically stand down to a retaliation from Russia, a retaliation from Putin, a retaliation from the BRICS nations, both Russia and China? Does the United States really stand down to an emergence of a new global currency in the name of the yuan, or maybe some basket of currency that represents the rise of the East? Does the United States really stand down to this? I mean, how do we get out of this mess? How does the U.S. get out of this mess economically? How do we ever get out of 0% interest rates and quantitative easing to infinity? How does the United States ever pay back all this debt? How does the United States potentially, which really is just the spoiled brat rich kid that's spent into infinity and taken out 1 million credit cards with no intent of ever paying it back, how does America re-solidify its dominant superpower status? Because I think that's what's pretty clear. The United States of America is no longer dominant. Our military not as strong as we once thought it was. Our country no longer as free as it was set up to be. I mean, we really live in George Orwell's worst nightmare, probably far worse than anything he could have predicted with his book 1984, this surveillance police state that makes up the US of A today. You know, Matt Drudge was interviewed on InfoWars a couple of days ago. Kudos to Alex Jones for nabbing the interview, and he made some really important points. He said that he had a Supreme Court justice look him in the eye and tell him that his days are numbered, that basically through partnerships like the TPP and copyright law that these corporations are going to be pushing through our system, the intent is to eliminate free thought, free thinking, to eliminate the independent media, to eliminate media companies like AMTV or InfoWars or the Drudge Report. I mean, this really is a war on information. This is a war on your ability to think for yourself.
I am not a part of that system. I am a free thinker. I'm an American. I'm very concerned with what's happening. So I just give it my all. I've learned how to take care of myself and detach from outcomes, because otherwise you can't survive. And I don't know where you are on that topic.
I just follow my instinct, because they always tell us how to adapt to be successful, but really we're just adapting to their mindset to be their slaves.
I don't.
No, you don't.
I have remained completely independent from all of them. All of them. I am not influenced by any of them. I need no traffic from Google. I don't care if I get one traffic referral from Google or Bing or Yahoo or any of these others. It's always been that way.
You know, we've been taking the internet for granted, I think all of us, for a long time now, that, you know, we're going to be allowed to continue to do this, to continue to share the truth with you, to continue to have opposing, vibrant views here in the United States, which is how the U.S. was set up from the get-go, that we would have dissent in this country, people that you didn't agree with all the time, people like me that would basically shoot through the shit and just give you the information as I see it. Just like Matt Drudge does, just like Alex Jones does, just like we do here at AMTV. I mean, how much more time do we really have as the U.S., through the surveillance state, the National Spying Agency, and this push for partnerships like the TPP, far worse than anything that Bill Clinton had put together through NAFTA, the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement, etc. How much more time do we really have? Again, it only takes an act of war, the smokescreen of war, for the U.S. government to clamp down the freedom of the press, to clamp down freedom of speech, to round up Japanese Americans as they did during World War II and throw them into the equivalent of concentration camps. It only takes a smokescreen and the act of war. And it's exactly what we have now. We've been engaged in a propaganda war over the last few years. This has been telegraphed right in front of our faces, this war in Syria. It's why I was able, and many of you were able, to see this coming miles and miles away. It's why we have dozens and dozens of videos dating back over 5 years ago predicting an attack on Syria, that this would be the flashpoint, the conflagration of world superpowers that would lead to the world war that we're living through now. This very, very dangerous environment, this very dangerous world. A country that has transformed itself through the administration of Barack Obama and through the administrations of George W. Bush to representing something it wasn't even founded to be. You know, our founding fathers would literally roll over in their graves and barf all over themselves to see this country for what it is today. As Matt Drudge said on his interview, this corporate glaze of Facebook and YouTube and Twitter, where's the independent thought? Where's the independent thinker? Where are the creative forces in this country? Where is the friggin' dissent? Where is the rage against the machine? Where is all this? You know, how is it that people prefer to read Google News, an algorithmic news source, which again is just programming you through robots, basically? I mean, this is where everything is headed, this robotic news environment. There's not even real humans interpreting the information anymore. There's not even going to be real humans editorializing this stuff. It's an absolute joke. There is a reason that, you know, this country was set up with the idea of freedom in mind. It protects things like the freedom of the press and free speech. There's a reason why that really is the most important weapon. You know, the one thing they can't take away from you is your ability to think critically. You know, if we allow our Supreme Court, the branches of government, to create new laws and basically that are backed by these corporate interests to destroy independent thought, the independent media, this alternative frame of reference, then where are we? I mean, how are we any different from a totalitarian police state like the West pitches us on a regular basis, like China? How are we any different from what the West portrays as this evil bear in the name of Russia and Vladimir Putin? How is that any different from 1984 and George Orwell's worst nightmare? How is this any different from, honestly, all of ours worst nightmare? This is where we're headed. This is how bad things are becoming. This is how deep the rabbit hole goes, how convoluted and dangerous this propaganda web is. I encourage you to continue to get the truth out. Please share this video everywhere. Uprate it. You know, send it via email. Get it out to everybody you know. Share all of our videos. Support the alternative media. Make sure we can continue to deliver the truth. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere. Make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.